Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Inside the Mirror podcast. I'm your host, Kyle David, as always. Back with a repeat offender, as I'm going to call them. We've had a few of those on the pod. This one is Mr. Joe Quattrone, SVP of Growth at Vayner Media. If you're aware of Gary Vaynerchuk and his empire, Joe is a part of that. Like I said, had Joe on the podcast before. As we said, Joe, mid-pandemic was a little interesting, the logistics, but Joe is back in a sturdy environment, and I am now visually here. So yeah, there we are. I'm going to stop talking. Be kind.
I love be kind. Yeah, my wife wears the mask you sent me all the time. She gets compliments on it almost daily. So
let's go. If you ever need more, I'll send you some more. We can talk about that. Okay. Well, Joe, thanks for coming on again. I know that you're a busy guy and you're actually on the East Coast and you live on the West Coast. So thanks for finding time for us.
Sure. It's just, and run of the mill Saturday, just hanging out with my sister. But I remember we were planning on doing this, so wouldn't miss it for the world. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. So let's just dive in. Can you give us I know you and I have spoke before, but the numbers say that there's a few more people listening, which is ideal.
Yeah.
So just give us a refresher background of kind of who you are, where you came from, and how you got to where you're at.
Yeah, lifelong East Coaster. So happy to be back for a brief amount of time, but live on the West Coast. I got my start in social media after graduate school. I was working for an agency. My main job was working on site at Audi of America, which is actually located here in Herndon, Virginia, the corporate headquarters. And my claim to fame there was really getting them live in a kind of go to market perspective in social media. So social media didn't exist. I mean, it existed, but very few brands were on it. So I developed a plan and helped the then CMO of Audi, get it sold into the German board of directors. We got some funding. We started up a practice, hired a team internally, hired an agency. I wound up going to work for that agency and running Audi social media for a number of years. Stuck in automotive for a while and wound up working on brands like Jaguar and Ford. And then eventually Gary Vaynerchuk found me in 2013, brought me over to run his beer business, which was small at the time, AB InBev. We had one brand. I helped him grow that, pretty sustainable $20 million a year, roughly revenue portfolio with brands like Bud Light, Budweiser, Shock Top, Stella Artois. You name it in the beer universe, and we touched it or competed against it. And there were some other portfolios I worked with as well, Johnson & Johnson, Mondelez, to name a few. Eventually wound up on the West Coast running client service for Vayner Media. But then this little startup inside the walls of VaynerX occurred called the Sasha Group. And I essentially lobbied Gary to allow me to open up a West Coast branch of that because it looked so interesting and intriguing to me. And that's kind of where I'm at today. I run the West Coast operations for the Sasha Group, which is VaynerX's small to mid-size offering. I also run education and training globally for the same company, for Sasha Group. And by training, I don't necessarily mean training our internal staff. I mean more training businesses on how to get up to snuff on their social media. And that's
love it. So you're in charge of the 4Ds, correct?
I am. I'm the host.
You run the 4Ds.
I'm the host and I recruit people to it. So that's a big part of my job is kind of first coming in and reformatting it so that it would live in a virtual world, right? Because when I took it over, we hadn't done an in-person 4Ds in 8-9 months since pre-pandemic. So really helping figure out how to create a virtual version of it. And then, I've been the host of the last, I'd say 6 or 7 editions.
What does that look like as far as going fully digital? Is it still fully digital?
It is. So we're getting ready to start in-persons back up in Q4. But it's not really all that different. So it's a good value in the sense that the thing that we cut the most out of was price. So originally The New York version, which is the flagship version, takes place in the same place that Gary has his office. You can take pictures with people like D-Rock and stuff like that. The original version was something like a $12,000 ticket. Somewhere like another VaynerX satellite office like Los Angeles or London would be more like a $10,000 ticket. Chattanooga 8, just depends on where it is and what kind of like attractions are there nearby. But the virtual version is $4,200. It comes with a membership to our education platform called Stork, which is everyday information that you can access. But $4,000. So if you take the overarching price of like a flagship ticket, the New York office trip, we've taken about 65% of the pricing out of it, but we've only taken out 2 actual modules. So what was a 9-hour day is now a 5-6 hour day. And the 2 things that we took out are, arguably some of the more valuable things, like an e-commerce deep dive and a paid media deep dive. But what we're left with is we still have core platform strategy. So we go through what the latest and greatest with all the platforms is. We have an expert come in and answer questions about anything you might need to know about paid advertising on Facebook or Pinterest or TikTok. We have a personal branding workshop with Nick Dio. We have a creative architecture session with Zach Moy, Zach is an interesting guy because he's not only the head of creative for Sasha Group, but he also used to head up design for Team Gary back in the earliest iterations of Gary having a team. So he knows Gary V's content model extremely well. And we actually workshop with brands how to build a similar content model. We also have a session with Claude Silver. It's a shorter, on the shorter side of things, like a half hour with Claude, where she really answers questions about how to scale organizations the way that VaynerX did, with empathy and heart. And then we have, similar to the in-person events, we have 90 minutes with Gary. The main difference is it's virtual versus in person. So the 90 minutes, and I don't like getting customers confused about that. It's not 90 minutes with you and Gary. It's you're among about 6 or 7 other CEOs. We tend to cap the event at a very low amount so that it's a very intimate affair. So it's not like hundreds of people in these events. It's like 5 or 6 or 7 businesses. You can bring a +1 or a +2, but primarily it's one person from each company talking with Gary. So you wind up getting about 15 minutes with Gary around, other CEOs. And the good thing about that, what we found that's a good formula for us, is that what Gary says to one CEO is typically pretty applicable to some of the other folks that we have in the room. So it does feel like a group setting with Gary V, where it's a lot more dynamic and back and forth than, it's not like a rigid, let's go on to the next. Let's go on to the next. So I'd say the biggest difference is cost, but then I also think the virtual is one of the more valuable things that we have in all of VaynerMedia, or all of VaynerX. It's hard to come by a service or a product that VaynerX has as low as a $4,000 price point that's going to deliver as much value. I mean, Gary's actually in there helping people name their companies. Like we're doing serious operational stuff in these meetings. So I think it's definitely one of the best values we have at VaynerX, for sure.
I love it. I've been a part of several 4Ds from afar, just listening to the podcast, because he throws those up on the podcast. So valuable, man. So valuable. Just the way that Gary gives back, and you guys being a part of it. I think sometimes we forget that Gary is, at least this is my own external perspective, is that yes, of course, Gary is the CEO, he's running the company, but like, you guys are a unit. Like there's a whole unit, like you, Nick, him, and D-Rock, but Claude, everybody. So I think we got to give credit to the behind the scenes. So credit to you guys. You're doing a great job.
Well, he sets the tone, and he basically tells everybody in the world what he thinks about the way things work. We're just like disciples of that. So we look at it and we put it into practice. But yeah, so I think like we're kind of out there as a company, just kind of owning, the process. And also, it's beyond just like what Gary thinks about platforms, the things that he thinks about, what type of values we have as a company, we all pretty much share the same energy, the same values. So it's not surprising that you see similar types of, language coming from a lot of us. We wouldn't be here as long as we have. Most of the people that you're hearing a lot of messaging from that represent VaynerX in the marketplace are people that have been at the company for like 7+ years. But even if it's shorter than that, it's just you exude the values that Gary holds near and dear. That's why he hired you. That's why you stay so long. That's why you're here. That's why you're proud to talk about it out in the marketplace. It's an ideal setting for you to thrive from a career perspective.
I love it. So just curiosity, did you always have an interest in marketing, or did you stumble upon it, or was schooling just, I guess I'll follow this path now, or how that
It was
about?
Weird. It was totally weird. I think I mentioned this on the last pod, but that pod was probably like a year and a half ago now, almost. I stumbled upon it because after like a not a traumatic life event, but a life event that saw me kind of go from 300 pounds to 175 in a short amount of time. I had a lot of reflection time as I was going through that process. And when I started thinking about goal setting, after I achieved this massive accomplishment, I started setting my sights on more of a long-term vision for myself. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do when I set out on that mission. But I knew kind of that the thought put into it had to be, a deep dive into like what really mattered to me and what was interesting to me. And one thing that I kept coming back to was I was really intrigued and curious by why people collect things. And it was something that was very prevalent in my life. My dad, my uncle, my parent, like my mom, my sisters, pretty much everybody that I've been affiliated with or, in relation to, they're big time collectors of things. And I always found that fascinating. And then my dad specifically, he was always into collecting old cars. Like he had in our driveway when I was a kid, I think he had a 66 fastback Mustang. He had a convertible 67. He had some 71, 72 Corvettes. My uncle collected Triumphs. So not like new and fancy and like, rich people cars or anything like that, but like they'd go to car shows and they would find like classic cars, buy them cheap and fix them up.
Love it.
He also went to like junkyards and found old Coca-Cola machines and restored them and stuff like that. And when he started doing that, I started being this is interesting. What is it with my dad's obsession with brands? And then I started looking into it more and I found out that it's not just him. He's not alone. It's a lot of people. Like in the post World War II era or the post Depression era, children like baby boomers, like my parents, their parents didn't have things. So you appreciate life and you appreciate material possessions more when you go through an era of not having anything. And so that's why you see a lot of these baby boomer era people getting really into collecting items. And then there was this whole like industry that was created around that, and this obsession that people have with brands through their collections or through the novelty of them created a really interesting and cool era of advertising. I mean, you hear Gary talk about it a lot when Gary talks about the company spokespeople, cartoon characters and stuff like that. That's exactly the era I'm talking about. That was like the golden era of advertising. So I started just studying up on, what made Coke so great or Tony the Tiger great and stuff like that. That led me to marketing school and advertising school specifically. And it became a passion point. It's one of those weird things where most of my friends in life are in relative adjacency to marketing and advertising in some way, shape, or form. And that's because I can talk about it endlessly. I could be at a bar talking about advertising for 6 hours and not get bored. And so that's what that's why I'm thankful that I pursued it. And that's why I'm still thankful to be here in my early 40s, having a thriving career in it.
That's so cool. That's as you say, these cars, I'm like, my grandfather was a car collector. And so he had an old, I think it was like a 56 Chevy. He had a 56 T-Bird, T-tops. Like, so I can connect with that. That was an era for sure.
Yeah, it still happens. It's just a little
Yeah.
different these days. But and I don't think most people understand why they collect the things they do or what they collect and the deeper seated meaning behind it and what it means
Mhm.
like from a society standpoint. But and a lot of the things that I'm saying are just kind of like me piecing together little bits of evidence. It's not like Bible or anything, but it's just my observations.
Your observations are valuable, Joe. I mean, Jay Quizzy. You put Jay Quiz. I saw that. Um, so can I ask you this question? Because
Yeah.
you're a highly successful individual in my mind, and I think most people would agree. And you said it back a little while back, a few minutes back. You said goal setting.
Mhm.
And as somebody who's younger, I'm 33, but very focused on long-term vision, what is it? Micro speed, macro patience. As far as something that you found helpful for you as far as goal setting, when you said you started developing a long-term vision for yourself,
Mhm.
what did goal setting look like for you on more of a micro level of like, okay, here's the macro vision, but I have to put some type of disciplines, routines, goal setting, structures in place to achieve the vision? What did that look like for you?
So it's a lot of, understanding that the decisions that you make, you got to have a level of anticipatory feeling towards the big opportunities in life. Understand that like you can have a big vision for your life, but even if you set your sights to like 20 years down the line, there's probably 3 or 4 moments in life that are going to impact those in a serious way, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So you got to understand that you can create routines that get you through in the micro that are kind of like building in a very slow way towards something, but it may feel like it's taking a really long time to get there, and that's
Hmm.
okay. um and that's actually good from a mental health perspective for you not every
Hmm.
day to go out there thinking some door is going to open and if you don't take it you're going to be a failure, right?
Hmm.
Some of you has to kind of figure out that routine that's going to set up your daily behaviors and daily habits to be able to just have the integration with your work and your life that you need to kind of to maintain the discipline for a long haul.
Hmm.
um but being ready and having an anticipation for understanding what opportunities look like and knowing when to walk through those doors and windows, right? So
Hmm.
one of the things I've been really good at is understanding deeply what my anchor for my career is and why it is my anchor for my career, why I want
Hmm.
that job, why I want that career, why I want that to be the thing that I aspire to become one day. I've always had a really good long-term goal for myself. But then when those 3 or 4 moments have shown themselves to me in my career, because I have that really good planted, rooted anchor in my life, it's been easier for me to spot what a possible pathway might look like that comes out of nowhere and might diverge me from my daily routine.
Hmm.
Um, so I can think, I mean, I set these goals for myself when I was like 22 years old. So I can think on one hand about the exact moments that were life altering windows of opportunity that opened that I walked through,
Hmm.
what they looked like and how I knew that they were going to change the pathway and the charter of my life. And maybe that'll help people. I'm not sure. But essentially, for me, you know that it's a good window of opportunity when you're able to ask yourself the question, is this getting me closer to my goal or pushing me
Hmm.
farther away from it? And the answer is closer.
Hmm.
Most things that come along divert you from your goals.
Hmm.
I'd say 99% of
That's
the
powerful.
opportunities that you're faced with will change the course of your life in the worst when it comes to your long-term goal because they're random, right? They might be
Hmm.
good opportunities, but they tend to be a little bit random. Very few things come along and are going to get you there faster, or are going to get you
Hmm.
there in a better shape or better form. So for me, I always wanted to be a chief marketing officer. That
Hmm.
was my long-term goal. I had this vision in my head that in order to become that, I needed to be really experienced and I needed to put in about 15 to 20 years of experience in marketing, maybe more, in order to get there.
Hmm.
And for me, at the time, I always thought it was going to be in the Fortune 500. I've since kind of calmed down on that stance a little bit, but the drive to become a chief marketing officer has never really gone away from me. It's always kind of rested and resided within me. The major difference between how I'm attacking it and the way a lot of people attack it is I've taken a non-conventional path to get towards that goal. Most people don't sit in agency world their whole life trying to get to become a chief marketing officer. They go the brand route to do that. The problem that I have is my vision for my career was so long-term at the time that when an opportunity stared me in the face, when I was, after I had built, with the help of a lot of people, built Audi's social media strategy and started getting them into the market, I had a choice that presented itself, and it was to propose to my wife, move to New York, right? I knew I was going to do that. That wasn't debatable. I had already bought the ring, so it was going to happen. But the thing that not a lot of people did was not a lot of people would go into the chief marketing officer's office and say, hey, I'm getting ready to propose to my wife. Do you have any jobs in New York? Or go to their agency and say, hey, I'm getting ready to move to New York. I don't know when, but like in the next year, do you have any jobs for me up there? Because most people will get laughed out of the room when they say something like that, because it's basically, no, I don't. And good luck. Don't let the door hit you on the butt on the way out. But I did that. And that kind of, in an interesting way, it opened up 3 pathways for me. So because I was so transparent and out in the open about what my plans were, I guess I was just a naive, like grad student kid. It opened up a 3-way path for me. There was, I could go fully brand side. I could go find a client to work with. I had already had some interesting experience getting a brand live in a specific realm of marketing, which was cool. I could parlay that somehow. I could stick at a traditional agency, which was what my former agency at the time was, Venables Bell. It was more of a classic, like TV commercial agency. I could go that route because I had some experience working for Venables now. Perfect. I could go that route. Or the wild card in the whole matter was I could go to a social media marketing company, right? That was very out there and a new thing at the time, and not a lot of them existed. But I had some practical experience in the world of marketing with Audi, and I felt like I'd be really attractive to companies like that. So the first decision I had to make was of those 3 options. And it was very apparent to me because I was interviewing with 40 different companies at the time. But I always felt a draw towards, so like if I went to the classic brand route, like I knew I wanted to stay working around social media. I was having fun doing it. And I also thought like, hey, 20 years from now, when I'm 45 years old or whatever, if I really believe in this form of marketing and it is prevalent and brands are spending most of their money in that world, and I come in with 20 years of experience in social media, that's going to be impressive. That's going to be CMO worthy at the time. So I started making that a core part of my decision making, thinking, which one of these opportunities is going to give me the most opportunity to do more of what I'm doing now? Is it going to be going client side? And I quickly marked client side off the route because I felt like the social media industry was so new and there were so few practitioners in it that I would get no mentorship or leadership, and I would be buried on the depth chart essentially, because most brands didn't care about social media until an agency could come in and give them the blueprint. So I eliminated client side right away because I just knew they would lag far behind in terms of the getting up to speed on the technology and getting brands on the platforms. Then my option with creative agency was attractive because I had the credentials. I went to a great school for that. And I worked for a great agency coming out of school. But knowing what I knew about them, it would take me like 15 years to get senior at a company like that. Just to get to like a group account director level was going to take me a really long time. And I didn't think I had that time because I was getting ready to live in New York and I needed to make more money faster. But then there was the social media route, right? And I kind of talked myself into that route because I knew if I went to a social media marketing agency, I could get senior a lot faster. They didn't know how ad agency world worked. And they were going to they worked specifically on social media, and there was other people there that were leaders in the space that I could learn from. But I was also going to get a lot more at bats directly with clients because the field was burgeoning, and companies wanted to bring agencies like that in more. So even though I was younger in my career, I was going to be able to be in a more senior place and talking to more clients more directly and getting my strategies into market and ready to rock and roll a lot faster. So that's the route I went. And it was glaringly obvious to me, a month into taking that job and moving to New York, that I made the right move. And within about 2.5 years, I'd become a VP at the agency. I went from assistant account manager at Venables Bell coming out of grad school to VP within a matter of 4.5 years.
Let's go.
And it's mainly just because I knew the long-term planning. I knew I wanted to be a chief marketing officer one day. But specifically, I was starting to think not only about that, it wasn't just that, it was, what is a chief marketing officer going to look like when I'm 45? It's probably going to be somebody that understands social and digital media really well, because that's going to be 50% or more of their budget. So then it made the micro decision making in the more like near intermediate term that much more obvious. I went this route not because it was going to be the best thing to do in the moment, even though that was true as well. I did that because that was going to put me on the pathway to getting to where I needed to be long-term, right? And it was going to set me up for that role that I will eventually take. Hopefully, I'm 42 now, but maybe when I'm like 3 years from now, 5 years from now, maybe I'll take that role. And then the next big moment was when Gary came and recruited me from that agency. And it was a conversation. And I had a conversation with Gary. And it was interesting. He told me, I don't know how much he remembers of this story, but we talk about it every once in a while. He told me, I like to hire people and have them with me forever. And I didn't know what he meant at the time. I think what he meant at the time was really, it was too deep for me to understand. I think he meant he just likes them in his like network, like part of the Gary family, not necessarily the employees lifelong, but I interpreted it as I like to have people as lifelong employees of mine. And I told him, I was like, well, you should hire somebody else because I'm never going to work for you for the rest of my life. Really? And I think he appreciated that honesty and the rawness of my answer. But I told him the Joe Quattrone train, and I hate using my name in the third person. I don't even like saying it now. But I told him, this is where the Joe Quattrone train is headed. And if you're not going to take me there, then I'm not going to take a job with you. And he was like, no, I think that's great. And he was like, I think if that's where you want to go, you should take a job with me now because I'll get you there faster than your current agency.
Let's go.
And that exact conversation is why I took the job, for no other reason. It's because Gary understood social media at a level that was so far deeper than any other person I had ever met in my personal or professional life. And I actually believed him in the moment where, he knows chief marketing officers. He knows a lot of them. I think his dad might've been one of them, or his father-in-law might've been one of them. And I believed him when he said he could get me there faster than anybody else. And so, yeah, a couple weeks, I mean, it took a little while to get the deal done because I was working on a Super Bowl campaign for Jaguar at the time. And I told Gary that I wouldn't leave until after that. But sure enough, a day after the Super Bowl ended, I had a job offer in my inbox. I took that job. A month later, I was at VaynerMedia. And those are the two major decisions I've made, the two major life-altering positive decisions I've made that have gotten me to where I am today since I made my anchor goal. Nothing else, right? So like a lot of people think you're sitting there making like 1,000 different like positive impact decisions that are moving you closer to your goals. I've had two, right? So it's really just being anticipatory and understanding what is my lifelong goal? Is it important? Is it meaningful to me? Do I know why I want to do it? And then understanding what are the very few things. Remember, I said there's going to be 99% of things that you're presented with are going to move you farther away from that goal, right? There's been two that have come along since then that are moving me closer to it. And I've taken both of those things. So I think that's, when you think about macro versus micro, that's what Gary means, right? You got to have vision and patience in the macro, but you've got to be hustling in the micro. All that micro means is like, be creating healthy, positive habits that are, inching you slowly but surely. Another thing I like to see is I show people a graph all the time, right? And this is more of how I regulate my emotions and I don't get too high or too low, but it's also a way to behave every single day. So I show them one graph that's, here is over and up, over and up, over and up. If that's
Mhm.
all you ever care about, that's how you should behave in the micro, right? You should know what up here is. And
Mhm.
every single day you should be doing something that takes you a little bit like incrementally closer to that goal, right? But then I
Mhm.
overlay that with a frenetic kind of like wave chart. And I
Mhm.
show them, but this is actually what you do, right? This is what most
Mhm.
people actually do. They live their life like this. They react to everything, and they get really high when they have emotional highs, and they get really low when they're down in the dumps and things aren't going that way for them. But if you don't get emotionally high when positive things happen, or you don't get emotionally low when negative things happen, if all you think about is over and up, you get slightly better every single day,
Mhm.
right? You'll have a much more profound impact on your daily life and your mental health. And you'll also feel like you're accomplishing something in the long term, right?
Mhm.
Something that is going to feel like an incredible, long drag, because people don't have any patience in 2021, is going to feel fulfilling every single day, because you feel like you did your routine, but that routine, gets you incrementally better every single day,
Mhm.
And so that's the way I would think about it if I was most people, is like, yes, have a routine, but always be looking at how to optimize that as well, right? Be
Huh.
making some constant improvements, just hack away and get slightly better every single day. And by better, it doesn't mean, that's a subjective term. To me, all that means is get closer, get
Mhm.
incrementally closer to your long-term objectives every single day.
Mhm. I love that. Up and to the right, but it's small up and to the right.
Right. Yeah. These things are tiny little changes in your life. They're tiny little things that are building on top of each other. These are the memories that you're creating. These are experiences, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of
Mhm.
people in my profession, they ask me, especially young people that I mentor, they ask me, well, what makes somebody senior and somebody junior, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
If I work 100 hours a week, why am I not getting compensated 100 hours a week? Why is the guy that works 40 hours a week getting compensated more? And what I
Mhm.
usually say to that is like, it is about experience, but that's not a level deep enough to break it down to people on.
Mhm.
Usually the way I can break through with that kind of language to employees or to peers or something like that is, look, I take it like this. If I had two candidates that are applying for the same job, let's call it an account director role. One of them has run 70 campaigns in their lifetime, and one of them has run two. While the person that's run two might be the better strategist, they may be more contemporary when it comes to like their knowledge of social media, but do I trust them? Right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Do I trust that they're going to make the right decision on behalf of my client and on behalf of my company
Mhm.
9 out of 10 times without me micromanaging them? I can't scale myself if I'm micromanaging people. I have to be able to
Sure.
trust people, you know?
Sure.
So that's usually the difference between experience. It's
Mhm.
repetition, right? It's the amount
Reps.
of repetition that you go through and understanding that you would make the right decision 9 out of 10 times or 10 out of 10 times. That's why I
Mhm.
can hire somebody and trust them, is they
Mhm.
have repetition. They have excellence in repetition. And people are so quick to get out there and like advance in their career. With for no other reason other than looking at their neighbor and saying, well, my peer is X or this person is Y. Like, don't get all that stuff out of your head. Don't worry about what other
Mhm.
people are doing. Worry about what you're doing. Most
Mhm.
of the reason why people worry about what other people are doing is because they don't know what they want out of their life or their career. I know
Mhm.
exactly what I want out of my life and my career. That's why I don't
Mhm.
bother myself with what other people are doing. I could care less what other
Preach.
people are doing in the day to day. I don't look to my next door neighbor for advice on how to manage my salary or how to negotiate my title with my boss. I'm on my own pathway. You're on your own pathway. Stop looking across the aisle. Stop cheating from other people's tests.
That's so good. And that's so good. That last part right there, the comparison thing, it's so good. And I think you would agree. It's also so hard at the beginning. I think once you get to a level where you've done it again, you've had repetition of not comparing yourself or putting yourself back into the tunnel vision. But even me, like in my own experience, I in my 20s, I built a kind of a career running restaurants, and then I took a break and did some other things. And now I just joined a tech startup, but at more of a very junior level. And so I've had to really practice that recently of going in my head. And, that's the tension between, I think, being a visionary and someone who has a lot of capacity, but is also young and doesn't have necessarily the experience, as you said. I've never worked in a tech company before. So in my mind, I'm going, I know what I'm capable of. I know that I could run this company. We only have 50 people, so we're very fresh. But I'm starting in just a small sales rep level. And I've had to really humble myself because I'm looking around, and I've had to stop comparing, because I'm going, most of these people aren't going to be here in 5 years. They're just young. And, and I've had to go, no, Kyle, blockers, put the blockers back on. This is just reps, man. This is just getting the reps and getting into the company that I believe in. Right.
You've got to, so especially when you're taking a paycheck from somebody else,
yeah,
the name of the game is going to the person that signs a paycheck and making sure that they think you're the most valuable person in the organization. That the difference between success and failure is how fast it takes you to do that. So if you're in an organization and you've got somebody that's signing the paychecks that is the influencer, and it may or may not be the CEO. In some cases, it's not. But in my cases, it usually has been. And so while everybody tells you, here's how you need to do, here's what you need to do to climb the ladder, I've always been the opposite of that. I just go find the person that's going to sign the paychecks, cozy up to them, and make sure that they notice what you're doing. Right. Like for me, when I was at my second agency, when I moved to New York and I was at Group M at a small agency called M80 running the social media business for Audi, I also had some non-billable stuff that I was not non-billable, but I also had some business development work I was working on. And there was one moment in time where I think there was like a big flu bug that went around. It knocked out like the top 3 sales guys, 3 new business development guys. And there was a bunch of pitches that needed to be worked on. It was like December. Nobody wanted to work on them, or nobody could work on them. I picked up like 3 pitches, worked on them by myself, and won all 3 of them, brought in like $2 million worth of business. And guess who that made an impression upon? The CEO of the company.
Of course.
So it's not rocket science. It's really just finding that person that makes the difference, the person that is the key influencer within an organization, and make sure that they think you are the most valuable person in their organization. If you do that, when you negotiate your salary, you can put any number in front of that person you want. It doesn't matter if you're more junior or more senior, right? You will climb 5 steps in the ladder immediately. If that person thinks that you're a threat to walk out of the organization because you're that valuable, they will make sure you do not.
That's good. That's good wisdom right there. That was a selfish one for me.
So I mean, I could see you if what you say is true and you feel like you are light years ahead of where other people in the organization are. It's a 50-person organization, and you're on the totem pole, you're employee 48, and you think you're number 2. You could probably get there in like 2 years. Like if you just really make the right shrewd maneuvers and like you just display the right kind of like hustle, not even just hustle, because I don't even think it's about hustle. I've never been the type of person that goes out and flaunts my willingness to work all hours of the weekend or night, because I don't think that's something that I lead with. And I also want to be a good example for other people around me. And I don't think it's a good example to just endlessly work without any purpose behind it.
I agree.
But if you go out there and you do the right things that people make notice of, like companies are in business to make money. If you know how to make money, then you'll probably have a good role at the company. And it's not to say that that's all it's about, but especially when you're young, if you can show a knack for helping the business grow, look, they're not there just to be your friend, So if you can show them how to grow and other people can't, I'm sure you will get rewarded for that.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. It's good. Hey, so let's go along with that a little bit. You kind of had said something earlier about it, and you're somewhat alluding to it even right here in the not focusing so much on I work 100 hours. Look at me. There's this underlying thing that I want to touch on, mental health. You had mentioned it earlier, and it seems like there's kind of these undertones of mental health in the way that you've been speaking about things. Have you dealt with mental health issues? Is that something that, obviously, I think that's something that's very important in culture today. We just have so many mental health issues. Kind of what has your experience been personally with that? And then also, what do you see just in the marketplace, in the world that you work in the Fortune 500 world? What does mental health look like for you and for that space?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of difficult, because I think on one end, I feel like mental health is just a buzzword that people throw around because they want to sound smart. But on the other end, I think it's like hyper important to not get burned out. And but I think it's not enough to just like stop at mental health and say, oh, well, if we just fix people's mental health, everything is going to be fine. I think everybody needs to be, and corporations need to be striving for, paying attention to much more than they did, let's say 30 years ago, right? 30 years ago, pre-internet, you didn't really have to worry about people's mental health. There was this global narrative, right? There's this global narrative that, came from postmodernism that essentially said, this is the way you should look, act, and behave. This is when you go to college. This is what you study. This is when you come out. This is what you do. This is the house you live in. This is the kids you have and the dog you have.
Right.
And there was this meta narrative of society that kind of governed how we acted and behaved.
Mm-hmm.
And when that exists, and there's not like a fragmented society with billions of decisions and hundreds of billions, if not trillions, of stimuli in your face, like social media and creative and, conflicting narratives that are telling you to be different in all ways, shapes, and forms. I think nowadays, even though we're advanced and evolving as a species and as a people, and that's a good thing, right? I think it's not something that I think we should shortchange. I think we should acknowledge how far we've come as a human species. Like 100%. 1980s version of Joe Quattrone, if I wanted to set up a meeting and have a conversation with a company, well, I would have to send them a letter. I would have to pick up the phone and call them. And like that whole act of like setting it up, if I had creative to present, I'd have to ship boards to them. Like the whole process could take weeks to do something we take 5 minutes to do right now. So if you think about it, nothing has really changed in the way that we govern corporations from a mental health perspective, even though we're jam packing our brains with 40% and more information, or 140% or 1400% more information. We're handling and we're doing a lot more, but we're still only saying you can't have mental impairities, right? Or you can't have mental disablements or have times in which you go through tough mental moments. Your insurance doesn't cover that, right? So when I talk about mental health, it's more of a combination of things. I talk about, mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being, because I feel like we, and everybody's got a different, locker code, right, to get into to unlock themselves. And to some people, spirituality may not be a part of it. To some, it will be. To some people, they don't really want to investigate the benefits of paying attention to your mental health, and some others will. I think it's always a good thing if we, as a people, analyze, study, and know ourselves better, right? And of course, have I gone through situations that are mental health moments? Yes, of course. But who hasn't? I feel like everybody has.
Yeah.
It's just not everybody's willing to talk about it. I go through moments in life. I'm here in Herndon, Virginia right now because I couldn't go to Texas to go to the wake of one of my best friends when he passed away of pancreatic cancer back in April. So I'm here now because COVID's eased up enough for a bunch of high school buddies to get together in an open air, masked up environment to pay our respects to the dead. And that's an incredibly difficult mental experience to have to go through. Somebody that's younger than me, who would be turning 42 tomorrow, died and left his 3 children and wife behind. And I didn't have a chance to mentally process that, so now I get to go through that in a healthy way. And I think it's a good thing. Of course, I'm married. I have 3 kids. I've had moments in my marriage. I've led a relatively successful, high impact career with big, huge brands and with big, famous CEOs. So of course I've had mental health moments at work. I've had employees or peers that I, don't see eye to eye with, that have led to frictions, which have led to anxiety and stress. But I'm not unique in that. I feel like everybody has dealt with that.
For sure.
Mine might be a little bit more noticeable and a little bit more acute because I think I'm doing it in a little bit more of a spotlight than some other people are. And I might be in organizations where, there could be more instances where politics can come into play. Sure. But I don't think I'm like wholly unique because of it. And I am willing to talk about it. I think the more we talk about these things, the better we are. And honestly, the more I talk about it and myself, the more it helps me normalize it for others. And the more that I can also like control my judgment of situations as well, right? Like if I'm going through this, what must others be going through? And how can I be as empathetic as possible to them?
Empathetic. That's the word right there. Right. First of all, sorry for the loss of your friend, man. That's tough. COVID's been wild.
He didn't die because of COVID, obviously. He died of pancreatic.
Right. That's
But
the timing.
it was the inability to really process the loss and being able to pay your respects and move on that COVID has robbed from a lot of people.
Yeah. So sorry for that. That's tough. The one thing I really like that you said there is the combination, the unlocking yourself. I think we're all on this constant journey to unlock ourselves, some more than others. But me personally, I've been on this journey for the past probably 4 or 5 years after some traumatic things that I just had to work through, of really diving this way, right? Instead of so much going out, even though I'm doing a lot forward and outward, I've had to realize a lot of, I think, and this is just my own personal experiences, a lot of the things that have come to me and opportunities that have come outwardly are because I actually went inward, if that makes sense. And I've done a lot of work to figure myself out, and still am on the journey, right? To understand what makes me tick, what causes me anxiety, what causes me to feel really high highs and low lows, and kind of how do I balance that out? So I think that unlocking the combination of yourself was something really wise that you said. I'm probably going to clip that for Instagram.
Yeah, well, I mean, you think about it, like the stimulus that is in our life and around us is constant. There's a constant drip of information and stimulus that, whether it's pictures or videos or sound or whatever. Sure. And there's a lot of things that are vying for our attention. And when we give in to those things and we pay our attention to it, it has a tendency to change us, right? For the better, for the worse, right? Sure. If I had to delete TikTok from my phone the other day. I'm just being real. Like, I work at Vayner Media. I love TikTok. I had to delete it from my phone the other day because I physically feel worse having spent 2 hours going down TikTok rabbit holes when I could have been applying my time towards sleep or towards reading a book or towards doing something else that I get more fulfillment out of. Sure. I think TikTok's one of the most brilliant things on the market today. I just, 100%. The way my body processes it, it makes it unhealthy. So, sure. Self-awareness. So yeah, like I think it's just, you just have to. I did the same thing with the election. The election back in November was a similar experience. Like, I'm not overly political, even though I come from DC. I definitely have my leanings, but I wouldn't really say I identify with either party. But I definitely have friends on both sides of the aisle or family. And I remember getting back into politics just the 2 weeks to 4 weeks from the run up to the election, just so I could feel educated on the topics and kind of dive a little deeper and just make sure I understood what I was voting on. And that kind of stuck around for another 2 weeks after the election. And then I started noticing things about myself. Like, I was just a grumpier human. Like, I just was not very happy to be talking to people. And I was snapping at my wife, and just simple things like easy conversations back in September became really complicated conversations in November. And so I detoxed from the news for, well, until now. Like, I'm still not really watching the news all that much because I think it's really a device where it's set up for us to fail. But I stopped watching the news and my happiness spiked to normal levels. So good. But that's just kind of one of those things where we all have to be looking at our behaviors and understand how we react, what the stimulus that is around us that's causing us anxiety. If you eliminate certain things, do you still have the anxiety? In some cases, you don't. Like, so if you can do something like that and it can cause you relief, then do it. Right. Yeah. That's
good. Sorry, TikTok. Joe's not.
Well, I'll always have like I'll be back kind of really. I never deleted it with the intent of never going back. I work in social media, so I have to know what's going on there. But the way I was using it was in an unhealthy manner. I was like looking at TikTok for 2 hours before I went to sleep at night, and it was destroying. I mean, I have a 1-year-old baby and two larger kids in the house. Like, that doesn't really do much for me health wise to be looking at TikToks for 2 hours before I go to sleep. So, just a quick little, you got to cut it off for now. I'm not saying it's bye forever, but it's kind of like saying goodbye to somebody that you've been hanging out with, for like a friend that you've seen for, for a while, for a week, and then they leave town to go back to their family. Like, it's, hey, we'll get together again one day. I'll be around TikTok, but I always want to make sure I am up to date on what's going on your platform. But for right now, I need to pay the check and get out of here and go home.
Give me the bill. Give me the bill.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a few more questions before I let you go.
Sure.
Number one more serious, one more just kind of fun. The more serious one is just out of, again, being selfish because I have you right here. What's the most important thing that you've learned from being around, in contact, in relationship with Gary Vaynerchuk?
Wow.
Most valuable thing.
The most valuable thing about being around Gary V.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough one because I feel like there's so many of them.
Maybe top two.
Well, I'd say one of the things is just what's on your shirt and why I really react to having fellowship with you. It's just, I think the thing I love about Gary so much is that he understands the ultimate purpose of this life, which is that you're not here forever. It's not finite. And if it would, people would be buying time left and right like it was the most scarce commodity. If you could physically buy time, you would. It would be more valuable than gold. It would be more valuable than anything on the planet. But we don't. We can't. And that's what makes it even more valuable. So while you're here on this planet, you choose, you make choices in how you behave and how you act and how you mesh with other humans. And he doesn't want to have any part of people that aren't here to do it the way that he does it. So I think the people that really succeed at VaynerX are the people that really live that out, the ones that genuinely have an interest in other human beings and figuring out ways to create the best possible experience with one another. The shared experience economy is something that nobody talks about, but I think is something that we will start to talk a lot about in the next 15 years. And what I mean by shared experience economy is how much has COVID really accelerated the way we communicate, right? We couldn't have done what we're doing in 2021 in 2008. If a global pandemic hit in 2008, it would shut down the economy because we physically didn't have the computing power and the bandwidth on the internet to be able to process one Zoom, let alone 10 a day.
Right.
But then it's, what are you doing in those moments? What are you doing in those interactions, right? Like, how do you treat other people? It sounds cheesy. It sounds basic, and it is basic because it's the golden rule of the Bible. You treat people how you expect to be treated. You tend to be happier in life. I don't know what to tell you. Like, we spent a ton of time going on a tangent about mental health. I know part of it starts with you being happy in general, right? Like, it's a feeling that's hard to replace. Just general contentment and happiness and understanding, having a perspective on life and how scarce and valuable it is. If you have that perspective, you tend to want to not waste your time being negative.
It's good perspective. That's a good word right there.
Most people, I tell you what, one of the reasons that Gary always talks about catch a tiger by the tail, and that's a good, I can't really recite it off the top of my head from memory, so go look it up on Google. But I don't know, what I see it as is like, you've caught that once in a lifetime opportunity. Like, the tiger is such an elusive big thing that, like, for you to have an opportunity to have it, it's something that you don't take it for granted. And I realize, I know that's why anytime I have discontentment or discord or disharmony in my life at VaynerX, which does happen. So for people out there that think it's like a perfect utopia, it's not. Nothing is, but it's close to it. If you could think about it, the reason why I'm always drawn back to this idea of this is a great place to be is because there aren't other companies out there that are preaching the important message of kindness and how you treat other people. And that's an extremely rare commodity out there. There's just not a lot of companies that care about the right things.
So true. It's great. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Yep.
Last question. Just a little lighthearted to end it all. Okay, so I've been asking people this, and it's very simple. You have three choices. Choice number one is energy drinks. Choice number two is coffee. And choice number three is tea. You have to pick one and tell us why. Energy drinks, coffee, or tea?
Okay. So I could take this from a personal perspective, which would be, what do I prefer? I'm assuming that you don't necessarily care what perspective I take it from.
Not at all.
But I'll take it from a different perspective, actually. Like you can guess which perspective I am. Probably just if you rewind the film of this tape, you'll see me partaking in something.
Saw some coffee.
But I'll take it from the perspective of probably what I should be consuming more of, which is tea. And it's an interesting perspective, because I think of coffee as like the dominant thing, right?
Sure.
Coffee to me is also a very westernized and America specific thing. Whereas tea, I feel like even it is healthier for me. It's also like the soccer of beverages, right? It's something, it's the football of beverages. It's like you go around the world, you go to other cultures, and tea is the more obvious choice in an afternoon setting when you're getting together socially with people, and coffee is not the most obvious setting. So I feel like from the perspective of like what the rest of the world and what the rest of cultures would say to this question, it's tea, because it has clear benefit for you from a health perspective, where coffee, there's some burgeoning research that says coffee is not bad for you, but we as Americans, we overconsume coffee. So I would imagine any of the benefit that coffee brings to you is not unlocked with the amount of consumption that we exhibit. Whereas tea, I don't think you're going to go real wrong health-wise if you drink 3 cups of it a day.
That's the best answer I've gotten so far.
So tea, it's the American, it's the global football, not the American football. Coffee is the American football.
Let's go. That's so good. Shout out to Angus over in England right now. You know Angus, I think, maybe. Even if you don't, it doesn't matter. Angus would love that answer. Well, thanks for your time, Joe. Appreciate you, man. Yeah, I appreciate your wisdom and your time. There's a lot of wisdom that I've been able to gain from this. So I hope anybody listening or watching gain a lot of wisdom from this, because this is a wise man right here. Thanks for your time, Joe. Enjoy your day.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you soon, brother.
Talk soon. Bye.